Let me start by saying thank you for the cards and prayers and thoughts of the last couple of weeks, and thank you for the gift, the luxury of being able to recuperate, and so I thank you for that, and I feel a little bit better today, and I'm actually kind of happy to be up here. So thanks. I did something this week that I have wanted to do for a long time, probably 40 years. I've thought about this, and I've thought about it and thought about it and thought about it, and never really bothered to do anything about it until this week. The first sermon I ever preached at Christmas, I was 16 years old, and I wouldn't really qualify it as a sermon. It was more along the lines of aimless rambling because, kind of a shotgun sermon, where I hit a lot of points and that kind of thing. But the first time I ever spoke literally was at Christmas, and I was 16, and that was 40 years ago. Gosh, I know, which really sounds depressing as I'm standing here, but I may take sick this week and be back in the bed. But anyway, so I did something this week I haven't done in all the time, and that is I literally went back and reread all of my Christmas sermons from the last 40 years. And I paid a special attention to the introduction. Because, most of the time at Christmas, you're generally talking about the kind of things that are going on in life. And I was intrigued by what I found and how life changes and yet how it stays the same. And some of you, it may be, for the younger ones here, it may be a little hard for you to relate to this, but I look back in my sermons and realize there was a time when there was not such a word used as terrorism. Y'all remember when there wasn't anything called terrorism? Right? There was no concept of it. There was no war on terror. That didn't even enter into our discussions as we thought about all the problems we had at Christmas. I paid $1.17 for a gallon of gas one Christmas. Then one Christmas it was $3.75, and another time, yesterday it was $2.16. So it's been high and low, hasn't it? And the one thing that's been consistent is how civil Washington's been. Actually, what was really funny is I remember my friend Sonny Davis. Gosh, I loved Sonny Davis. And Sonny Davis was part of the Republican Party, head of the Republican Party of the state of North Carolina. And he told me about the good old days, and I have it written in the Christmas sermon, in the good old days when the Democrats and Republicans used to go to dinner with each other, and they would argue like cats and dogs on the floor, go to dinner with each other at night, shake hands, and then cut a deal. And that's how things worked. And hey, you guys remember when Democrats used to like Republicans and Republicans used to like Democrats? Hey, how many of y'all remember that? I remember it, and I have it in sermons, and oh my gosh, I've got so many things. One year there was a house fire in a congregation, and another congregation there was an automobile accident that took the lives of a member. One Christmas there was a pillar of the church who passed away. I've even got sermons where, hey, how many of you remember when there was no internet? Yeah. I remember sermons when we never discussed the concept of Black Friday and Cyber Monday. And I don't know about you guys, but I can tell you, Marcia and I've done 50% of our shopping. Well, no, I don't. Yeah, I'll say it. We've done it at the kitchen table in our pajamas. Yeah. I remember the novel idea of, and I wrote about it in a sermon, about the one year when they did the most unusual thing. They opened up the mall at 12 o'clock, and everybody went shopping. And we thought it was the most novel thing in the world. And now it's, right? I mean, think about all these things. Healthcare, the healthcare has been consistent. It started here and just kept going that way. And I worried about that. The economy's been good. The economy's been bad. There's been recessions. There's been no recessions. We've had heroes. Our heroes have failed. Our heroes have succeeded. The one thing about the national debt is the same as health care, right? And I understand that. And what's interesting is violent crimes have increased, but violent crimes have also been reduced. And finances are tight. How many of you remember the battle for Christmas and keep Christ in Christmas? Remember that discussion we had? Then we had discussion about which stores are Christmas friendly. And how many of you worried about whether we should say Merry Christmas or Happy Holidays? Right? And remember when there was a discussion about was it a Christmas tree or a holiday tree? Or how about the year we had the big argument about the manger scene? Should it be legal on public property? Y'all remember that year? And then here was one of my favorite years. This was back in the late 80s. What stores would Jesus shop at? Right? I remembered the Christmas that I realized that diversity, political correctness was going to be honored, and it was going to be part of our fabric of our society. That was the Christmas when Jovi was just a little girl, and Marcia and I were invited to speak to her class. And that was the year they told us in no uncertain terms, we will discuss Kwanzaa, we will discuss Hanukkah, and we will discuss the Christmas traditions of the Christian church, but everybody has to be included. And so Marcia and I got an opportunity to come and share what the true meaning of Christmas was in a public school. And guess what? Haven't had that opportunity since. What a world we live in. Which means that I've gone through 40 years of sermons, and for everything that's changed, it's all still the same, isn't it? And today you come to worship, and this week, the same problems your mom and dad had, you got the same problems. And the same issues that your brother and your sister had when they were coming up, you got the same issue. Because for everything changing, it all stays the same, doesn't it? And so life is either going to be about it's really about how well you handle it. And your times are going to be really, really good, or they're going to be in a really bad place. But nothing kind of ever changes, does it? Right, y'all? Isn't that true? I'll remind you the story I shared with you several years ago from Richard John Newhouse. I just, for my money, just one of the most amazing stories. Richard John Newhouse, of course, was a Christian social critic and a writer, and wrote some very just incredibly powerful things. But he was invited to speak at an engagement in Pittsburgh. And it was going to be a bang, bang, bang quick engagement. He was going to fly in. They were picking him up at the airport. They were literally driving him to his speaking engagement. He was getting out of the car. He would speak, literally get back in the car, go back to the airport, jump on a plane, and go somewhere else. So it was like, and so the guy picks him up, the driver picks him up at the airport, and as he picks him up, the driver doesn't even introduce himself, doesn't say his name, but proceeds for 20 horrible moments to be the most pessimistic human who's ever graced the earth. And Richard John Newhouse says he's sitting in this car, and here's this guy worried about the disintegration of American society, the disappearance of Christian values, the death of the family, and this goes on and on and on for 20 straight minutes. And Newhouse says, I endured the most tedious, painful drive of my life. And then when it's over with, and the guy pulls up to the place where Newhouse is going to speak, he jumps out of the car, opens up a door, smiling at him, and says, thank you for the opportunity to drive you. I had a great conversation with you. To which Newhouse smiled and looked at him. He said, can I give you some advice? And he said, sure. And here's what Newhouse told him. Look, times may be bad, but they're the only times we have. And then he said this, hope is still a Christian virtue, and despair is a mortal sin. And here's what I want to say to you. Times might be bad, but they're the only times we have. Right? And your little world might be bad today, but it's the only little world you have. And I want to say to you, hope is a Christian virtue, and despair is a mortal sin. And so it was. I don't know if you've thought about the Scriptures and thought about how the Bible describes the coming of Jesus, because the coming of Jesus showed up into a world that was really in a mess. I don't know if you thought about the people, the children of Israel. When God came to Israel, they started taking God's blessings for granted, and they rebelled against His laws, and God kept trying to say to them, repent, straighten up, do what I want you to do, or else. And finally, they just went so far along in their sin that God said, okay, I'm going to honor your sinfulness, and I won't live with you. And so the book of Ezekiel chapter 10 tells us that one day God's glory just slowly left. And read it. It's in Ezekiel chapter 10. He leaves from the Ark of the Covenant, comes out of the Holy of Holies, and then leaves the temple altogether, goes to the Mount of Olives in Jerusalem, and literally ascends back into heaven. And what happens? God's glory is gone from Israel. And it's dark in the Holy of Holies, and which is why the Old Testament calls it Ichabod, right? The glory hath departed. Because God literally just said, I won't put up with this. I can't live with sin. I can't live with disobedience, so I'm leaving. And God pulled His glory away. And you know, I think I've shared with you before, one of the things I've often wondered is once a year when a high priest went into the Holy of Holies, did he come out and go, I've seen the glory of God? Do you think he came out and lied? Or do you think he went in and just said to himself, wow, He's not here? And didn't say anything when he went out? I don't know. But I know one thing, God pulled His glory out. And then history says the Babylonians came, took over Israel, destroyed Jerusalem, destroyed the temple, and the people had nothing left to hope for. Now, John Ed Henson was right. I wrote his quote down because it just was mind-blowing to me. God is never interested in being the curator of a religious museum. Guys, God loves vitality in our relationship with Him, but He's not interested in being a religious curator of a church. Right? He wants to be in His people and be among His people. And the Israelites wouldn't have anything to do with it, so God left. And they prayed for Him to come back. When they built the second temple, read it's in Haggai 2, they prayed that His glory would fill it. But the Bible says there's never any mention of it. And so for 400 years, what happened? Nothing. God didn't say a thing. No more new prophecies, no more prophets, no nothing. God just stayed quiet. How many of you like the silent treatment? How many of you are well aware when you're getting the silent treatment? And see, that's what happened. Literally, God gave the children of Israel the silent treatment for 400 years. Okay? So, now, you think you got it bad living here in the good old U.S. of A? Or who you think had it worse, us or the children of Israel? It's pretty rough, wasn't it? At the same time, the Romans, though, they were around and they were running the show, and the Bible tells us all the old religions were dying in the Roman Empire. The philosophies of the Romans were empty. Religion in Rome couldn't change anybody. And so the Romans held on to this noble concept that the Senate would rule the country and do right by everybody and make everybody happy. And that was gone too, because it was replaced by high taxes and political corruption. And that sounds familiar, doesn't it? And over and against all of that stuff was the structure of the empire itself. They had Roman roads beautifully built everywhere to take anything you needed, and it took the gospel. And they had the Roman law to protect citizens, and it preserved people so they could hear the gospel. And they had Roman soldiers everywhere to keep the peace, and it preserved everything so people could hear the gospel. And they had Greek and they had Latin, and everybody was speaking it, and that's what the gospel used in order to spread. And that's the world that Jesus showed up in. But here's the beauty of the story, and I want you to see it, and this is just my verse of Scripture, Galatians chapter 4, 4-5. But when the right time came, God sent His Son. Y'all, come on. Y'all, come on. When did God send His Son? At when? Ooh, I love a right time, don't you? At the right time. God sent His Son. And not only that, He sent Him to redeem us and adopt us, but it all happened at the right time and not a moment before. And so here's what I want to say to you. In the midst of like all the days that you and I are living in, look, Jesus still enters into the world, doesn't He? And I want to say to you that Richard Lee was right, absolutely. Jesus' arrival at Christmas is not a rerun, it's always a debut. Y'all, come on. When we gather for worship today, we're here not watching a rerun. This is a debut. This is new. This is fresh. This is hopeful. This is exciting. And every year it's still exciting. And Hughes Wagner is right. You just got to give Christmas a chance. I mean, if you don't give it a chance, it doesn't do anything for you. How many of you remember Alexander Woolcourt's, just amazing story from World War I? Remember the story of Christmas Eve, according to Alexander Woolcourt, when he's standing literally watching the Germans on one side and the American and British on the other side, dug in their muddy trenches and no man's land in between them, that place of pain, suffering, and death. And on Christmas Eve, all of a sudden, the Americans hear the Germans singing. Have you heard the story? Isn't it an amazing story? They're singing Stille Nacht, Silent Night in German. And as they hear it, and the story is so beautiful, the Americans sing and the Germans respond, don't they? Yeah. And under an arrangement of truce, they climb out of these mud-filled trenches and literally make their way across to each other. There's not a general anywhere to be found. It's just men, and they laugh, and they look at photos, and they share food, and for a few moments, they're humans, and not Germans and Americans and British. And Woolcourt simply says, that's what happens if you just give God a chance. If you just let Him into things. If you just understand that He wants to show up with hope. Now, here's what I know. Over my 40 years of Christmas sermons, here's what I realize. God has an amazing way of always showing up at the right time, doesn't He? And Jesus shows up at the right time. At the right time, God sent Jesus. And the truth of the matter is Jesus is the only God who dares to live in a world that's bristling with problems. It has all kinds of difficulties. And the amazing thing is He invites you and I to be part of the plan. To be in the business of redemption and adoption. To have our part in it. And the truth of the matter is look, the times may not be very good, but the reality of it is they're the only ones we have. And Jesus shows up in them. Now, you say, that's good, great, and grand. Here at Christmas, God showed up through His Son Jesus at precisely the right time. What does that mean to me? Okay. Here's where you take something home with you. If God knew exactly the right time to send Jesus into the world, how many of you think He knows the right time to send Jesus into your daily living? How many of you know? How many of you believe that? How many of you believe that God has perfect timing? How many of you think that Jesus just has a way of showing up right when you need him most? Right? Isn't it interesting? I read one writer this week, the most important thing that ever happened to the planet was the coming of Jesus. And here's his exact words. You'd think he'd be in a real hurry, but he wasn't. Nope, Jesus was a full-term baby. There was conception, there was development, there was birth, and there was growth, and he was a grown man, and then God decided, quote, to do something about it. He wasn't in any big hurry. Timing means everything, doesn't it, gang? When you going to come? One day before it's too late. Right? See, here's the deal. If God knows exactly when to send Jesus into the world, please understand that Jesus knows exactly when to reveal himself to you in your world. Because God's timing is perfect. Everybody here, if I gave you time, you could stand up, come up here to the platform, you could get behind this mic, and you could tell us about a time in your life where God came at the perfect moment. Right? One of my favorite verses out of the book of Isaiah, and boy, this is my nugget for you today, is this wonderful promise. It's actually given to the Israelites, but it's a principle for us. The smallest family will multiply into a large clan. The tiniest group will become a mighty nation. I, the Lord, will bring it all to pass at the right time. You say, when are things going to change in my life? At the right time. When is my situation going to get better? At the right time. My mother and I were talking not too long ago, and she said something just kind of made me laugh. She said she read where God basically looked and said to somebody, look, I heard your prayer, just trust my timing. Sometimes we just need to be reminded of that simple truth. Look, God's heard all your prayers. You just got to trust his timing. Because he'll come. When does he come, y'all? At the right time. When does he bring it all to pass? At the right time. When did God send his son Jesus into the world? The right time. The right time. You know, the thought occurred to me this week that as we come to worship during this holy season and we celebrate the God who sent his son at the right time, that we might need to talk to him a little bit about some of the things in our own lives where we need him to be involved. Right? Maybe you're in a relationship where you need him to get involved in that relationship and heal that relationship. Right? Maybe you're in a situation where your checking account is not as beefy as it used to be, and you need to bulk it up a little bit. Maybe you're in a situation where you don't like your job, and you'd like to see a change in that job, but it's not the right time yet. Right? Do you guys want to fill in the blanks? Maybe you're in a place in your life where you don't understand why circumstances have happened the way they are, and why they've unfolded the way they've unfolded, and God hasn't explained himself yet. Why? Because it's not the right time. Right? Or maybe you're in a situation where you're absolutely 100% puzzled as to what to do because you've never had to do it before, but now you got to do it. And so you're scratching your head going, where do I start? How do I make this happen? When am I supposed to know what to do? And God smiles and goes, well, at the right time, I'll show you. Right? Please tell me I'm not alone in just believing that God is a God of perfect timing and that at precisely the right moment that God shows up. Right? Hey, just out of curiosity, is there anyone, I'm done too, by the way, so I'm moving back away from there. Is there anybody here today that has brought your own little issues in here and you just need to hang on to God and you just need to say, God, I just want to trust you that at the right time you'll show me what to do. At the right time you'll reveal yourself. At the right time you'll make this thing work out. Did anybody here bring anything like that with them today? Can we for just a few moments then, here's what I'd like for us to do. Can we just take that and just offer it up to him and go, okay, I'm going to trust you with this, because the truth of the matter is I'm in over my head and I can't swim anyway. Right? Please help me to be patient. Please help me to be hopeful. Please help me to have faith and to trust you.